Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got the Redbird Report. T-Bone, we got some real news this week because Mike Shildt decided to retire as the manager of the San Diego Padres. And at the time, it felt a little strange. It's like, okay, you won 90 games this year. I can see how you would get burnt out, but Mike Shildt's 56 years old. It's not like he's been doing this job for 15 years. He's been a manager for a full season 4 times in his major league career. He just got this job in San Diego, which I would imagine for a lot of managers is pretty close to a dream job 2 years ago. I mean, this is his second full season in charge. They've got expectations. They think they're going to be a good team again next year. So it's like, okay, man, this kind of came out of left field. What's going on here? My assumption was we would get some kind of an explanation as to why he decided to retire. And we now have exactly that. The San Diego Union-Tribune had an explosive piece earlier this week about some of the details on what it was like to coach with Mike Shildt, what it was like to be a part of his staff. And it relates back to some of the answers that we've been searching for about why Mike Shildt was no longer the Cardinals manager after that 2021 season when he won 90 games and was unceremoniously fired right around this time 4 years ago. So this is one piece of a very lengthy piece over in the San Diego Union-Tribune. Quote, Shildt acknowledged Tuesday that the things he was hearing about why his departure existed in San Diego were, quote, eerily similar as the other place that I managed. The Cardinals have only ever publicly stated that Shildt was fired due to philosophical differences. A half dozen sources, including current and former members of the Cardinals organization, and 2 people who were part of front offices that considered interviewing Shildt in the month after he was fired, said that some Cardinals coaches and others threatened to quit if Shildt remained with the organization. That did not occur in San Diego, though multiple coaches indicated that they would have left if they had found opportunities elsewhere. What is clear is that there's a disconnect between what Shildt and others believe, what Shildt and others he has worked with in San Diego and in St. Louis feel is an appropriate management style. No one has ever questioned Shildt's drive to win. His intentions are not really even an issue for many of his detractors. His methods are. In other words, Shildt's tough to work for, man. That is my read of the situation. Is he's just a really difficult guy. He grinds you down. And according to this story in the San Diego Union-Tribune, and there's a lot of reporting that went into this, it's tirades. It's constant berating of some of the people that work underneath him. And then he'll put on a good face, go into the clubhouse, and he'll talk with the guys, and he's buddy-buddy, and he's good with the players. But it's the people that he's working closest with that he's most difficult on. And T-Bone, I think some of the reaction to this among Cardinals fans is, oh, so everybody in Major League Baseball is just soft nowadays. I don't view it that way. I think this is not a shining example of what leadership is supposed to look like. Tony La Russa was tough. He was a really tough manager, right? He was tough on his players, but he loved them. He was tough on his coaches, but he loved them. And there was loyalty there from both sides. What I find very interesting, you look at the time that Mike Shildt was here in St. Louis, and you look at his coaching staff out in San Diego. You know how many carryovers there were?
0.
Not a single one. Not a single one. Think about that. Think about how rare that is in Major League Baseball. Like, think about the connections that Ollie Marmol has from his time just playing here in St. Louis or being a part of the organization. Like, he's close with Skip because they were both tied to the St. Louis organization, right? So Skip comes in as his bench coach here in St. Louis. He didn't take that job in San Diego. He took it here. You think about the relationship that he has with Descalso. Shildt was here. Why didn't Descalso take that job out in San Diego? Well, because he likes the working relationship that he has with Ollie Marmol. You think about the staff that was already here in place in St. Louis. They didn't bolt and go take the job in San Diego when potentially having the opportunity to do so out there. No, they stayed here to work under Ollie Marmol, who was promoted to become the next manager here in St. Louis. I find that to be pretty telling. There were a lot of guys that were very loyal to Tony La Russa. So even if he was maybe a tough guy, he could be difficult, he had loyalty within the people that worked for him. So it's the first time that we've had any kind of closure on what happened here in St. Louis and publicly an acknowledgement of why it was necessary to fire him. So that's a lot of the background on where we stand today for anybody that had not seen the report previously. T-Bone, what was your reaction when you first saw this? And what did it make you think about, 4 years ago, what took place and why he was let go here in St. Louis?
Yeah, when I saw this report, I decided, when you see that, all the questions around how his exit came in St. Louis, at the time it was very cloak and dagger, very weird, didn't really make a lot of sense. And now it makes sense. There's kind of closure. It's almost like closure to the John Mozeliak era of, okay, now I know why he made this kind of weird decision at the time to move on from a manager that had just won 90 games the previous season, got them to the wild card where they lost to the Dodgers and were in talks on a contract extension at the time. And now it all kind of makes sense because you're right. That's not the kind of leadership you want from a manager. It's not really leadership you would want from a front office, right? If there was a report that came out about a president of baseball operations that was doing this to his staff, he would probably be a guy that was also going to be on the chopping block as well.
It's not leadership you want in any area of any organization. Forget baseball. Think about whatever it is that you do for a living. You don't want to work for somebody that operates this way. And so what that ends up doing is you're not able to retain the coaches that you already have on staff, and you're not able to attract the best coaches anymore either, because the candidates for those jobs are going to get chances elsewhere. And guys talk in this organization, in this community. The coaching community is pretty tight-knit. They know who the guys are that you want to work for, and they know who the guys are that you don't want to work for as well.
And I'm glad you brought that up because, the report of, hey, staffers were threatening to quit in St. Louis almost put John Mozeliak on the bind of, okay, now I have to make this move, right? Because, I don't have an exact number of how many people were on the coaching staff, but let's use a nice round number. Let's say there were 20. There probably was more, but let's just use 20 as a nice round number as assistants under Mike Shildt in some capacity. If I'm getting that 9 guys want to quit because they don't like working for Mike Shildt, it's easier to move on from the one guy that is the leader and go replace him because there will be plenty of other good quality options for a manager than it is to replace those 9 people that left because of exactly what you're saying. Word will get around that he is tough to work with. And if you have staffers that quit, now you have to replace those 9 staffers in the scenario that I just laid out that you've got to start working on, and it puts more pressure on the organization. And it's not a good look for the organization if all of a sudden it is, hey, by the way, we have to go out and hire 9 new people. Okay, well, now there's going to be questions about, well, why did everybody just suddenly go up and leave? So this is why John Mozeliak had to make this decision. I think Mike Shildt is a pretty good manager. I've got some qualms with how he's handled bullpens in the past, which is one of the 2 big things you have to do as a manager. But the biggest thing you have to do is you have to have the players ready to play, which he was able to do, as the report says. The Padres players seem to love him. All we heard was Cardinals players seem to love Mike Shildt. But you also got to be able to work with your staff because there is so much information that is being contained to where you have to work with the pitching coach, you have to work with the hitting coach, you have to work with the athletic training staff, you have to work with front office members. It is not just, hey, I am on the field managing the product that you see for the 9 innings. It is all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes before a game, after a game, and working with those players or with the coaches for a full 162 game season. And if you lose the will from the coaching staff that don't want to work with you, now you're really setting the organization back as a whole.
I think it's an important point that you make there. It speaks to how much of the role of a manager is not forward facing. It's not stuff that is, hey, which reliever do I use here? What are we going to do with our lineup? How are we going to navigate that? who starts against righties versus lefties, right? Hey, it's the 7th inning, big pinch hit opportunity. Do I deploy my right-handed bat off of the bench here, or do I wait to do so until the 9th inning because they got a lefty closer? Like, these are all decisions, of course, and this is what we, more often than not, evaluate a manager based upon, because that is the stuff that a fan would see. So much of this is internal. So much of it is conversations that you're having with players to get them into the right headspace. So much of it is the decision that you make at night can be based upon a conversation that you had with a coach earlier in the day, and that coach felt comfortable bringing that to you because it is an environment in which disagreement is not only accepted, but promoted. And if it's not accepted, and you aren't able to have that pushback among your staff, and it sounds like that was maybe the case for Mike Shildt in his time, both as a manager in San Diego and here in St. Louis, well, now you just get siloed, and every decision is your own. And man, I'm humble enough, weird thing to say, but I don't know everything. I don't think Mike Shildt knows everything. I don't think any individual person is going to be able to make the best decisions based solely upon what they think is the right decision. It should be a collaborative effort. Otherwise, what's the point of having your staff? So I think all of this just leads me back to, it probably was the right decision at the time to let Mike Shildt go. What I also hearken back to is, and we'll never know the answer to this. This is something we'll just never be able to get. Why not leak some of this stuff? And I don't know, like maybe it was for legal reasons, right? I know Mo has mentioned that on the air with TMA recently, that there was like lawyers that were suggesting things. I have no idea. I don't know what to make of any of that stuff. But if it's not that, like from a human perspective, I get that Shilt's your guy. There's probably some level of loyalty there still from Mo to Shildt, where he knows if this stuff got out after his time in St. Louis, he probably doesn't get the San Diego job and he never gets a second chance. And so Mo's thinking might have been as simple as, I don't want this stuff out there because I think Shildt can learn from what happened here in St. Louis and he'll go on to do great things at the next job. And then it's up to Shildt and it's up to him to actually make those changes and implement it into who he is and how he operates as a manager. Clearly that didn't happen. But for the Cardinals, I think it put everybody in a really bad spot because Mo is now viewed as the guy that fired this great manager for no reason. He just wanted his puppet and all these different things. So Mo is painted in a negative light for this decision. And it was almost inevitable that the next hire, unless it was like Yadier Molina, Albert Pujols, some like all-time Cardinals great, right? Bring back Tony La Russa, something like that. If it's not one of those, or Bruce Bochy, like a guy that has had serious success in their history, it was probably going to be a scenario where that next manager is viewed as nothing more than a puppet for Mo. And that's because of the way that all of this went down. And so I do wonder, like, man, was this really the best thing for the organization to not have this stuff go out there previously? Because San Diego now has cover. Because there was some stuff right immediately upon Shildt stepping down / retiring, where it was like, Preller does it again. Ran off another good manager. Preller's a madman, tough to work for, clearly was trying to get too involved, all of these different things. And then you see this come out, it's like, oh, okay, maybe Shildt was the problem, not AJ Preller. So he has cover here. It's messy, but there's cover for the organization, and now they can move on and go to their next hire without everybody saying this is a Preller problem and Shildt should have been the manager for the next 5 years. I just wonder, I can't help but wonder, man, did this end up doing them a disservice to not have any of this stuff actually floated out there the way that it was in the San Diego Union Tribune?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there is some that I agree with in that, because I do think it would have probably helped the Cardinals, and it would have, I think more importantly, I think it probably would have shielded Mo more than anything, because I think I want to say that moment right there was probably the last straw for Cardinals fans with Mo, is the firing of Mike Shildt, how it's handled, how it's cloak and dagger, and then you go out and hire Ollie Marmol. What's interesting is I'm not sure Ollie still gets a benefit of the doubt, even if it is leaked, of what happened with Shildt here in St. Louis, because he was a younger, inexperienced manager. And I think a lot of people would still look at that and say, okay, sure, maybe the Cardinals did have to do this. They did have to move on for Mike because here's all the information that happened. But instead of going out there and hiring another veteran, an older guy that has experience, they hired a younger guy and still would be viewed as the puppet. I think because of the way they did it, both of them have to end up wearing it. I think ultimately, though, I'm not sure it would have ultimately mattered for Ollie Marmol. I think he was always destined to get kind of handed the role of, or the title of Mo's puppet, which is unfortunate. But I think that was probably always going to happen just because he was so young and so inexperienced when he got the head coaching job.
I do think in a roundabout way, some of the timing is kind of fortunate for the Cardinals because there's this clean break. Okay, I now have closure on the Mike Shildt era. You mentioned it. It's closure on the John Mozeliak era. You're moving into Chaim Bloom, now gets to start his tenure. There's no second guessing about the manager thing. Now, there's going to be people that don't want Ollie Marmol to be the manager any longer, sure. But the Shildt stuff can just be put in the rearview mirror entirely. And so it closes the door to what had a pretty... It's hard to call it a dark era, but it was kind of a dark era of Cardinals baseball over the last 5 years or so, and that included this decision. And now that there is a little bit more information on why it took place, even if you don't like it, even if you still disagree with it, I think it's easier to understand for people now why the Cardinals ended up making the move that they did and why they thought, no, not only is this the right move to make, it's necessary for us to go in this new direction with a new manager, because the San Diego Padres, it sure seems like, came to the exact same conclusion at roughly the exact same time of when Mike Shildt was their manager. In other managerial news across Major League Baseball, Albert Pujols is now apparently a candidate to become the manager of the Angels, which we knew, but also is reportedly going to interview with the Baltimore Orioles for their managerial opening. And there's another report today coming out of the Dominican that he could be a candidate for the job that we just mentioned with the San Diego Padres. T-Bone, I don't know where he's ultimately going to end up. But my read on the situation, when you have a guy that potentially could get 3 different interviews in one offseason, I'd be pretty surprised at this point if Albert Pujols is not a major league manager in 2026. Is that the same way that you read it? And what do you think about that? How's that going to be viewed here in St. Louis of Albert in another uniform managing a different team?
First off, I do think he is going to land a job. I don't know that it'll be San Diego, because I find that one hard to imagine, because you are in the win now mode in San Diego, that I don't know that you can, even though Albert's a great player, he is a first-time manager with no experience at managing a Major League Baseball team. He's done it in winter ball, but this is a whole new level. So I don't think he goes there. I think it's either Angels or Baltimore. And I would lean probably towards Baltimore, because I could see them making this move with a young club. They've now got this guy that had the Major League Baseball experience, and he can really help some of their young hitters as well, like Jackson Holliday, and the Holliday family knows him fairly well. I think Cardinals fans are going to be very frustrated already at Chaim Bloom if he does not go out and hire if Albert gets a job and is wearing different uniform, because I think Cardinals fans are ready to be done with Ollie Marmol, and they want one of the former greats to be here. And we get a text all the time about Chris Carpenter when he left the organization and is with the LA Angels now as kind of a pitching consultant, I think is what his role is. And you've got all these different former Cardinals that are sprinkled around. Matt Adams, Alan Craig are in the San Diego Padres system. I think Cardinals fans are going to look at this and go, why are we not bringing our greatest players into the organization? And instead they are leaving and going elsewhere. Albert would fall into this. If Yachty follows him and was going to be a part of his staff instead of being a part of Ollie Marmol's staff, I think people would get very upset about it. I don't think the reaction is going to be, oh, I'm so excited for Albert Pujols. I think the reaction is going to be, I'm upset the Cardinals didn't go out there and make this hire of Albert Pujols.
Do you think that changes if the Cardinals hire Yachty or Molina as some kind of a coach this offseason?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I think people love Albert just like they love Yachty, and I think they would prefer to see both of them here in St. Louis.
I think you're probably right, but They were never going to do that. They were never going to fire Ollie Marmol in favor of somebody else this offseason. I think they view Ollie as a good manager. And I do too. I agree with the decision. I don't think you get rid of a manager. I don't think you get rid of a coach of any kind in any sport just to see what's out there because he's a franchise great. I think that's a losing proposition. Now, I think Albert might actually end up being a really good manager. I think there's a chance of that. Yachty, I'm more skeptical of for other reasons, but on the Albert side of things, I think he could end up being a really good manager. I think you might already have one internally, though, and I don't see the need to make that kind of a move other than just for emotional reasons.
I'll say this, and this is no shot to Ollie Marmol, because I agree. I think he is a good manager. I don't know how Heim still views Ollie Marmol as a manager. And the reason I say that is he said all the right things publicly, as he was just on our show today and said, hey, well, I've got a great relationship. Me and Ollie, we talk. Okay, that's great. But if he doesn't get a contract extension this offseason, that means you're at least open to flirting with new managers at the end of the season, or if not in midway point of the season, which that one would shock me. But if he's not handed a contract extension, I'm not sure that I'm willing to say Heim does believe Ollie Marmol is a great manager and worth sticking around here in St. Louis.
That's fair. It's a fair point. He's going to have some big decisions to make this offseason, and the managerial chair is just one of many. Another one is what he's going to do with the rotation heading into 2026. Will there be new additions? Could they come from the free agent market? It's something that we asked Chaim Bloom about earlier today. We'll let you hear what he had to say next here on the Redbird Report. Okay, so earlier today, T-Bone, we talked to Chaim Bloom, Cardinals president of baseball operations, easy for you to say. And we asked him about their plan with the rotation heading into next season, because they need to add some starters. They've got at least one, maybe two, possibly more open slots in that rotation. And there was a piece from MLB.com that connected them, I mean, very, very loosely.
Think about everybody to him.
Yeah, with Dylan Cease, free agent starter to be, 29 years old. He'll be 30 this offseason. And for those that aren't familiar with Dylan Cease's work, he's a really good pitcher. He's been a top 5 Cy Young candidate twice over the last 4 seasons. The other seasons, though, he's kind of got this even odd year thing that was going on with the Giants for a while. That's basically what's going on with Dylan Cease. His odd years, 4.5 and 4.5 ERA. Even years, 2.2 and 3.4 ERA. Pretty darn good. Every year, great strikeout rate. He strikes out about 11 batters per 9 innings. He's a stud in that regard. And if you can get the rest of the arsenal figured out, man, he could be a superstar for his next team. I mean, like legit number 1 starter that you feel good about going into a playoff series kind of a starter. Spotrac is projecting him to make roughly $26 million per year, probably over like a 6-year type of a contract. The reason that I'm bringing that up is because we asked Chaim, hey, what's the plan? How do you guys view the rotation in those open slots right now? Are you open to adding via free agency? And he said the thing that you would expect, which is, yes, we're open to it. I followed up by asking, would you be open to a multi-year contract? He again said, what you'd expect. We're open to anything. If it makes sense for us, it's something that we could potentially explore. I don't think you could realistically look at the Cardinals this offseason and say, hey, they should go sign Framber Valdez, who's 32 years old and is going to get $30+ million per season. I don't think somebody like Chris Sale makes a lot of sense for them. I don't think if he ends up hitting the free agent market, Brandon Woodruff, who's going to be 33 years old, makes a lot of sense for them. But Dylan Cease at 29/30, Ranger Suarez at just about 30 years old, maybe Shane Bieber, if you want to go in that direction. These are guys that could get multi-year contracts who the Cardinals could have here for the next 3 to 5 years, if not more. And then suddenly you start to build on that in your rotation. I think it would make a lot of sense. T-Bone, is this something that you're open to? Is going bigger with a starting pitcher this offseason via the free agent market?
I'm a little more skeptical to go on the longer term deal of the free agent market for starting pitching, just because I'm not sure that's where they are at yet as an organization. Because I like some of the pieces that they have in the minor leagues. And I think it was Fangraphs, if I remember correctly, grading them out as being the number 1 pipeline in baseball. But like I still look at their system, I go, man, they are lacking a lot of talent, in my opinion, that is getting close to the major leagues. Like it's J.J. Weatherholt, Liam Doyle, and that's probably the end of the blue chippers. And that's what I'm talking about, these blue chip talent pieces. And that's why I'm a little skeptical to go long-term with this, because I just don't know how long they truly believe that they can turn this around and get back to being, forget like a contending team, but just a like consistent, hey, we are going to be a playoff team for the next 2-3 years, and then we'll build upon and get to that contention level. And that's what makes me skeptical to say, okay, let's commit to a 6-year deal, for example, to like Dylan Cease. Because, okay, I would be willing to do that if you thought maybe if it's 2 years away that you believe you're going to be back in this playoff mode. But if you're thinking like 3-4 years away, well, now you just wasted 3 years of this deal, and who knows what he looks like by the time he's 33, right? He may have had a major arm issue that's popped up. He's not the same pitcher. A shoulder's gone awry. I think they need to be more in the like 1-2 year market and looking for high upside strikeout, swing and miss stuff, guys. Like, honestly, I don't know that Shane Bieber's going to get that long of a multi-year deal. He might, but he makes some sense for them. I think a guy that like Dustin May, who had a bad season, he's got some swing and miss stuff. You go out and get him a 1 or 2 year deal. Griffin Canning, who's coming off a ruptured Achilles, he had a really good year for the Mets. When he gets back and healthy, you could get him a 1 or 2 year deal. I think that's more of what they should be exploring, more upside in the rotation on shorter term deals, because then they can decide if they want to keep that guy longer after he's been here or try and trade him and get some value out of him. I don't know that I would be doing a 5-year deal this free agency period, because I just don't know that it makes sense for them.
I'd be interested in it. It kickstarts where you're at. And then at any point, like there are teams every year that we see that they're just ahead of schedule. You know, the Baltimore Orioles a couple of years ago, it clicked. And they were ahead of schedule. And it's like, oh, they're ready to go right now. And then you know what they were missing? Pitching. And a lot of the time, that's what happens is you find your team is ahead of schedule. The Tigers last year, by the end of the season, they were ahead of schedule. And then you look at it, you're like, man, we're missing X, Y, or Z. We're light here. And it's because we haven't added that yet from the outside, and we didn't produce it internally just yet. So if you're the Cardinals and you see, I agree with you, T-Bone, they're lacking when it comes to major league ready starting pitching. It's basically Quinn Matthews and Liam Doyle. Those are the two guys that you could realistically, from your system next year, see at the major league level. There are a few other guys, but they're a little further away, and maybe by the end of 2026, we're starting to talk about them as well. But right now, that's really the two. So, okay, what if this does work next year? I'm not saying that it will, but what if it does? What if Ivan Herrera is suddenly a 25 to 30 home run player and they keep Brendan Donovan? He's an all-star second baseman. They decide, you know what, we're going to go with JJ Weatherholt at third. And he's immediately a stud at the major league level. 20-plus home run hitter, bats 280, 25-plus stolen bases, just looks the part, right? And now you're looking around the diamond, you're like, we're pretty good. Like, this is a pretty decent baseball team all of a sudden. Wilson Contreras still doing his thing at first base. Maybe there's a step taken by Victor Scott. He's getting on base 34% of the time, stealing 50 bags for you. And okay, here we go. We're hitting the ground running, except you don't have any pitching. And now you're light there, and realistically speaking, they're not trading the assets necessary at the trade deadline to be able to go out and acquire it to be a real threat once you get into October. This is why I would say, get yourself ready for it. Whenever that time comes that you're ready to compete, have that rotation ready to go. And adding somebody like Dylan Cease is the kind of thing that would allow for that to be possible for you. At any point over the next 4 years, whenever you're ready, Dylan Cease is also ready to go. So is it something that they will do? I would be very skeptical of it. I would say probably not. I absolutely think that it is something that they should be considering this offseason, though, because it's the kind of move that would not only pay dividends for 2026, but could also help you in 27, and 28, and 29. And you look at these future years and some of the free agents that are coming up, man, there's just not a ton when it comes to the free agent market in future years. So whether it's Cease or maybe doing the exact same kind of a move, but via the trade market, maybe you trade for somebody, your version of what Garrett Crochet was last offseason for the Red Sox, maybe not to that degree, but somebody that can be a legit number 2 or 3 starter for you, and then you extend them, I could get behind that as well. Whatever the case is, whatever the name is, I would like to see them make an upside play for their rotation that can help them not just for 2026, but potentially for years to come.
And like, I'm not necessarily completely opposed to it. I guess the problem that I have with making the move yet, like you mentioned the Orioles, right? The Orioles click in, I think it was 2022. They ended up missing the playoffs, but it was like, oh, wow, okay, we are here. And I think it was the following offseason or 2 years later, they eventually add Corbin Burnes via trade. I almost want to see it click first before I go out and make the move. I want to see that, okay, we did get it right with the core players. And I'm mostly talking position players first off, because I think they're probably going to have to be an organization that has to supplement the rotation. They've always been known as an organization that can develop position players. But the reason that I bring that up is if I can't name who I think is a part of the core now, I don't know if it makes sense to go out and hand out a long-term deal for a starting pitcher. I would rather wait until I see, okay, Weatherholt is going to be the guy. Oh, wow, we did fix Jordan Walker. Okay, now we've got these two pieces. Now let's go out and sign that arm. I would rather figure out the problem once I see it click for your rotation before committing to a longer-term deal without knowing if it's going to work out or not for your position players.
My argument against it would be this, what you just said, of waiting to see it. Sometimes your window is a year. Look at Baltimore. They had their window, may already be gone. Look at the Texas Rangers. They had their window. It's like a year, may already be gone as well. Look in the National League, the Atlanta Braves. I thought that window would be a decade. What if it's gone? And it's just, they got their World Series and then that was it. Look at Arizona. If they had, they kind of did, but like they had their year where it clicked and Corbin Carroll was amazing. And that dude was a rock star for them. And it all kind of fell into place. And now this year they won 80 games. And last year they weren't the same team as they were. Like sometimes the window that we talk about, like this may have been it for the Cubs. It may have been, hey, PCA had this unbelievable, really first half of the season, MVP caliber, and that allowed us to be this 92-win team. And otherwise, like that was kind of it. That was the year. We had Kyle Tucker for that one stretch. Like that was it. Like Wilson Contreras may be a huge part of why you're good next year. And maybe that's the end of his prime. Maybe next year is the career year for Brendan Donovan and for Jordan Walker. Who knows, right? Like weird stuff happens in this sport that we try to analyze on a day-to-day basis. And if you don't have somebody internally ready to go and you miss it, you'll forever regret the fact that you didn't have that guy here when you could have had your opportunity. And it's so hard to acquire this level of pitching at the trade deadline. I mean, you've got to give up so much capital to get anything approaching that level of guy, even if they're even available. Most of the time, they're not moved. So that's why you've got a really rare opportunity here to capture lightning in a bottle of a guy in Dylan Cease, who's not a perfect pitcher. I'm not trying to sell you on something otherwise, but he starts every game. The dude posts like crazy. He starts 30 plus games every year that he's available. He has some of the best stuff in Major League Baseball, 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. He's relatively speaking young for a free agent at the age of just 30 years old. Not even 30 yet. He turned 30 in December. And he's not going to cost you an arm and a leg because of some of those inconsistencies that I talked about. I think it's almost the perfect concoction for a team in the Cardinal situation to go make your play for a big free agent move. But he'll probably be a Philly or a Dodger.
Oh, a Dodger.
Padre, yeah. Angel.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Yankee.
He wouldn't go to the Angels.
Something like that. So that's probably where he ends up.
I guess this is where we separate on this idea. And again, it's not that I don't like Dylan Cease. Like I was all in on acquiring him when he was with the White Sox. I don't see a path for the St. Louis Cardinals if you add Dylan Cease to the top of the rotation. And I'm assuming in this situation, they've probably traded Sonny Gray. I don't know if we're on the same page of that or not. That way they've got some financial flexibility that probably helps them. It's cost maybe a little bit less because Gray's making, I'm not sure, 35 mil. I don't see a path where you sign Cease. They probably trade from their position group that they are a team that's a playoff team still. And it's just because I look at the rest of the rotation. The rest of the rotation's still not good enough. You know, you're talking about Liberatore. You're talking who was okay, but I don't know what he is. And maybe it clicks. Maybe that is the guy you're talking about that kind of steps up. McGreevy's a pitch to contact guy. Like I'm very skeptical of what his ceiling is. We're going into a year which it sounds like they're going to have Leahy build up and be a starter. Okay, but as we just saw with Liberatore, eventually he's going to hit a ceiling where the body starts to feel it the first time being a starter over the last handful of years. I just don't know that I see them as a playoff team, like any scenario. Like it's hard for me to see. Like it is one of those where like there's a million things that have to go right. Like Weatherholt all of a sudden pops onto the scene and is a superstar. Doesn't happen very often for even like the best of the best. Mike Trout had struggles in his first year. And with that being said, it's hard for me to just convince myself of, yes, Cease is the perfect guy for you to go out and sign because maybe you do hit the 1 year window this year. I would still be planning on, okay, let's wait a little bit. That way we have the flexibility for future years. And at some point when we see this window starting to open up, and maybe it's at the end of next year, where you're like, boy, weather hole was a little bit better than we expected. We still weren't a playoff team. Even adding Cease probably wouldn't have done it for us. Okay, let's go into the next free agent class and let's go trade for the big arm that'll be available. Or let's go sign the big arm that'll be available, like Freddie Peralta, who will be a free agent in 2027. I would prefer to go that route because I just don't see the path. When you're trading potentially Donovan, potentially trading like one of your Newt Bar, maybe even Burley, who knows what they decide to do.
Sure.
I just don't know that you're making all these moves with your position players that, yeah, I add in a starter. Now we're ready to go, right? Like maybe we end up being that team. It would shock the crap out of me that they could be a playoff team next year.
I would have said the exact same thing about the Milwaukee Brewers this time last year. The exact same things that you're saying, all of them apply to Milwaukee.
Sure, but like I think there was much more upside in what they were doing with their like pitching pipeline. I mean, they've just proven it, right? And I guess maybe that's where I'm at. Like, yeah, I was skeptical of the Brewers too, but then when I see them in the playoffs, I go, okay, yeah, it's the Brewers, right? They know what they're doing over there in Milwaukee.
Sure, but there was a start of that. Like they got to that place at some point because it was the starting point of what this era of Brewers baseball has been. I would also say this, like the barrier for entry in the National League just isn't that high. The Reds made it this year.
Wow.
I know that we forget that. Like, they did not do anything once they got there. They won 83 games and made it to the postseason. So we have this idea of what it means to be a playoff.
I don't think
it's just not that hard.
I don't think that's going to be the bar over the next like couple of years. I could be wrong on that. But like, I don't expect the Mets, like Cohen, that guy's probably going to go on a spending spree again.
He has before, too. I thought they were going to be good this year. They never seem to live up to any of our expectations. All right, T-Bone, last thing before we get out of here today. We are watching October baseball. No surprise, the Dodgers, they're really good at this. Once again, they get to the postseason. It's like, oh, yeah, we have Tyler Glass now as our number 3 starter. Oh, that Shohei Ohtani guy? Yeah, he's our number 4. We paid him $700 million. He's our number 4 starter. You'll get to see him here in a few days. It's the Brewers versus the Dodgers. It's the Blue Jays versus the Mariners. And the winners are just hitting Ding-Dong Johnsons left and right. That's it. That's the lesson of the postseason so far is, hey, hit home runs, you probably win the baseball game. You had the stat the other day, what is it, 20-4?
Yeah.
The team that hits more, out-homers the opponent, 20-4 so far this postseason. Now, some of that is, yeah, well, of course, more on like the team that scores the home run scores points, which means that they end up winning the baseball game. It's really important to hit the ball hard and to hit for slug. And that's once again been one of your biggest takeaways from the postseason. What, as you looked into some of the numbers, did you learn about slugging percentage and how it is correlating to success this October?
Yeah, so I look back to 2015, which is kind of the year that I pinned as kind of the slug baby slug, and then like, let's just strike out the world. Feels like that evolution came to baseball. And I took it another year forward to 2016, where maybe baseball, everybody's starting to get on that path.
I would say 16 is the start, because the Royals won the World Series in 2015 with the bullpen, but they were not a power hitting team. And then 16 was the start of what I would consider the super team era with the Cubs. That was the tanking that started to work, right? So you got the Cubs, you got the Astros, and then the Dodgers become what they were. I would say that's the start of whatever this era is. It started in 16, in my opinion.
So I went back and looked since 2016, and I excluded the 2020 season because it's such a small sample size, 60 games. Weird stuff happened that year. Since 2016, there has only been one team in Major League Baseball to reach the World Series that was not top 10 in slugging percentage. And that was the Arizona Diamondbacks that you mentioned that had their one little blip of a window. And that was back in 2023. And they were a weird team because they weren't top 10 in strikeout percentage. They weren't top 10 in slugging. They were, as I think can happen in sports, they were the one-off, right? Every now and then there's a blip on the radar. They happen to be that. Since then, though, only one team there's not been a team outside of them since 2016 that has gotten to the World Series. Not winning it, but just gotten to the World Series. That has not been top 10, and most of them end up being top 5. And that just goes to show you have got to do damage once you get to October, because it is so freaking hard to hit the best of the best. I mean, the Dodgers, look at poor Milwaukee, what they're going up against. You mentioned their 4 guys. They look like they are trying so hard to try and muster something. They just don't have the damage or the power to put up a crooked number. You look at that Mariners and Toronto series. What has led to the 3 wins? teams are hitting home runs, and they're not just home runs, they're 3-run homers, right? You get maybe a walk, a little single that you happen to get, and then boom, you take advantage of that, take advantage of one mistake, and you crush a home run. The theme of October, and it's been this way since I started working in this building here at 101 ESPN, which is 2021, and I've said it from then, and we've dated it to 2016. You have got to slug, and you have got to miss bats with your arms. If you don't do those two things, you might be able to get to October. You're going home from October, though, without a World Series championship.
Yeah, I mean, and as this applies to the Cardinals, they just need more slug. They've got to find it. And Ivan Herrera, 465 slugging percentage this year. Alec Burleson, really good season in that regard. Underrated season in terms of his slugging percentage, in my opinion. 460 by the end of the year. Contreras, 450. Nobody else was above 425. The only other one that was above 400 was Brendan Donovan at a 420 slugging percentage. Arenado was 377. He was 5th on your team. This is where you severely lack. You've got to find guys in the system or find guys externally that you can trade for that bring more pop to the plate. I'm really curious to see some of their players internally. To what can they become in this regard? Mason Wynn, I don't know what his upside is in terms of slugging percentage. I think he should hit a ton of doubles. I think he should. Is that going to be in his future, though? Or is it going to be closer to what we saw this year, which would be fine? He's still a really good and useful player if this is what it is. But that's going to be part of unlocking the next step for him, is unlocking a little bit more slugging percentage. JJ Weatherholt, the ceiling for him will likely be determined by what his slugging percentage is going to be. Victor Scott, can he slug? Can he get there at all? If the answer is no, again, he can be a useful player, but his ceiling will just be a little bit capped in that regard. So, and if you're going to have Wynn and Scott in your lineup and neither of them are slugging, it just puts that much more pressure to find dudes that are going to hit, 35 plus home runs with some level of consistency, as those guys are everyday players in your lineup. All right, that's what we've got for you guys today. It's been a long one for an off-season edition of the Redbird Report. A lot of news this week. If you guys missed our conversation with Chaim Bloom, Cardinals President of Baseball Operations, you can find that over on the YouTube feed, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. BK and Ferrario, it was October 16th, that show. About midway through 12 o'clock, we were able to catch up with Chaim Bloom. Highly recommend hearing the entirety of that interview. It was about 15, 20 minutes, a bunch of different conversations about Yachty, about the pitching side of things, about his philosophies on what makes a championship level baseball team. So you can find that over on the YouTube page. We'll be back with you guys in a couple of weeks. We're going to do this every other week or so throughout the Cardinals offseason as we get more news. Maybe we'll get a little bit more in there, but for now, that's what we are going to have for you. For Tanner Hendrickson and for Zane on the video side of things, I'm Brandon Kiley. Thank you guys so much for listening today on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.